And now it's time for Talking Trade with Sandi Siegel and Ken Waslick, sponsored by the Wisconsin Center for Manufacturing and Productivity, Michael Best Strategies, and Carroll University.
Welcome to Talking Trade. I'm Sandi Siegel, president of ME Day. Our guest today is Richard Hyde, British Consul General in Chicago. Great pleasure to have you today, Richard, and very timely. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks. It's great to be with you.
So I think most people in trade are familiar. We had some trade negotiations, obviously, with many of our strong trade partners, UK being one of them, with the US. But we reached a pretty significant trade deal between the US and UK, and good news for both countries, certainly. So I'm hoping you can kind of, as we chat today, talk about some of the highlights of that and the details of the new deal. Tell us a little bit about the buzz in your perspective at the Consul.
But yeah, it's all very exciting. So you might recall back in February, our Prime Minister, President Trump, announced a deal. That was the framework for the deal. And
Right.
for us, this is something we've been talking about for a number of years. Since we left the European Union, this has been one of the big things we've been trying to achieve, and it's been challenging, and so it was a big breakthrough for us in February. And of course, this week, the President and Prime Minister in the margins of the G7 in Canada have signed the deal now. So we've now got some flesh on the bones of what this means. And fundamentally, what it's about is a reflection that the UK and the US have. They have a trade relationship that's balanced, that's fair, and frankly is reciprocal, and it's all about kind of mutual prosperity. We are not a threat to US jobs. We are not a threat. We do not undercut you on steel or or agriculture or anything else that people are rightly concerned about. But we are a complementary economy. We do things that you do, but we do it slightly differently, and then the market will decide, in trade, which is the best way of doing it. So, we have no fears of UK products, and the UK and the US need to have no fear of us. And so that's where we've got to with this deal. I think that's why the president has signed this deal first, because I think he understands that the UK is a partner, not a competitor.
Well, and a longtime partner and ally, and like minds and so forth. So, and I would certainly think post-Brexit, the UK is again it more interested than ever in securing some of those relationships, as you
Absolutely.
say. Always interested in how it close to home and impacts us here. I know one of the sectors there is agriculture, increased market access for U.S. beef, and areas like that. Again, near and dear to us here in Wisconsin. Can you elaborate on some of the provisions and benefits for agriculture and the dairy industry, and how that might help us here in Wisconsin?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, agriculture, anybody who's ever been involved in international trade and international trade deals, agriculture is the bit that always is the most complicated and the most emotional in some respects, because everybody rightly is proud of what they produce and how they produce it. And what that means is that different countries have different traditions, they use different technologies, they apply different standards, and these are not necessarily better or worse, they're just different. And it's really difficult because consumers are very demanding, and rightly so, that their food should be safe and they should know what they're eating. So it's quite difficult to kind of open up your market to food that's produced in a different way. So it's always the most challenging bit of an agreement. And so what we've reached, I think, is a point in this deal. I mean, there's much more we can do, and there's much more we want to do on this, but we don't want to hold everything up. So we focused on two things, really. One is, the US is a massive producer of ethanol, and the US and the UK is a consumer of ethanol. We produce our own as well. And for a long time, the US has been has wanted to increase its ethanol exports to the UK, and that's something we've created a new quota for ethanol, which is not easy for us, but it's something that we thought was right as part of the process. And that's kind of linked, not linked directly, but indirectly to a recognition that, you know, beef is something that we produce, and we produce differently, as I said before. But our consumers can decide, you know, what they choose. So US beef will be able to access the UK market. UK beef will be able to access the US market. Obviously, in terms of scale, the US is much larger. But it allows farmers to produce for a market to that market's requirements, but knowing that there's an opportunity to sell in much bigger quantities. So that they're kind of the starting points of our agricultural conversation. But I think we're going to go much further and much faster now we've got a foot in.
Well, and reducing the barriers. I with all the conversations I've had about agriculture and trade over the years, I have never heard anyone explain it as emotional, and I love that, because
it is.
It totally is, and it's so much a cultural thing. I know when I travel abroad, I walk through the food markets, and there are a lot of things that are outside of my comfort zone, and I think it is very much, you know, emotional and cultural, and it's a very interesting perspective.
Well, I was talking to, I meet with farmers and farm bureaus and rural communities as often as I can, because it's a great insight into how, you know, middle America thinks and acts, which you don't always get in big cities. You get a different perspective. And I was talking to I won't say who, but I was talking to a leader of a farm bureau recently, and he said, "What is it with the Brits and your fixation on standards, and our standards in particular?" I said, "You got to remember that we've had." You know, I remember in the 90s, we had a whole issue with mad cow disease, it was called
Yes.
CJD, and mad cow disease. And that was because, you know, we possibly didn't have the grip we should have had on how we produce food. And we had a foot and mouth outbreak not long after that as well. And, you know, this made consumers really, really ultra cautious about food. And it means now that if you want to have a conversation about American food or food from another country, the first question is it safe? And it's very difficult to explain the minutiae of differences and the chemistry and the food processing that is done here. It's very difficult to explain that to a consumer. But a government's job is to make sure that, you know, we everything we do is right for the consumer, and the US government is equally as focused on this as well. So it's something that we all want to do, and we're all really proud of our farmers. We're all really proud of what we produce. So yeah, we don't want to destroy our own markets, but we want to increase trade, and we want to remove barriers, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, well said. So switching commodities here, steel and aluminum, another really big focus in trade for all countries, and you know, a lot of protectionism here in the US. And, you know, we recently increased the steel and aluminum tariffs to 50%, with the exception of the UK. That got a carve out of being charged only, you know, the previous 25% on steel, aluminum, and content of steel and aluminum, various products. It looks like we're, you know, our future negotiations include creating a quota, you know, most favored nation status in this trade deal. So more benefits in balancing steel and aluminum imports with the UK. What are your, you know, thoughts on that, and where, you know, opportunities again on how we benefit and you know, both sides of the pond in that trade deal?
Yeah, I think again, I mean, it's another emotional. Steel in particular is another emotional sector, right? I mean, you know, we were both at once major steel producers in the Industrial Revolution in the UK, and the 20th century, you know, manufacturing revolution in the US is built on the back of countries producing steel. It is very expensive to produce steel now. You know, the energy costs and everything else. It makes it difficult for us to do it. And what we have to do is protect where we can our indigenous industries. Now, the UK steel industry has really suffered for a number of years, but the steel we produce, again, is not a threat to the US. And so I wouldn't say it was an easy negotiation, because it certainly wasn't, but it was a logical negotiation with the US. We produce steel that's used in really kind of high-end production for things like military equipment. And it's part of our relationship on you know, our joint military work. You know, the F-35 program with Lockheed Martin. You know, the UK is a founder member and 15% partner of that. So, you know, we provide steel as part of that process. So the tariffs were actually causing problems across a range of sectors. So getting carve-outs for the UK, we are not a threat to US steel. Again, in terms of scale, in terms of what we produce, we're quite niche, and I think that's been understood by the administration. The same with, as I would say, aluminium. We disagree on the pronunciation, but again, we're not
and along with a lot of other words, but yes, go on.
Yeah, but that's always the one that I think Americans laugh at the most. Yes. Yeah, I mean, aluminum. It's again, the UK is we produce a product that you produce, but we produce it slightly differently, and we're not producing it at a scale that's going to be a threat. China, as everyone knows, has formed in the past for dumping steel. There's been lots and lots of international cases about this. The US government, whether it be President Trump or President Biden, or it doesn't matter who it is, the US has had issues with this in the past. And whilst we don't like tariffs, we don't like tariff policies, we recognize that the US has an imbalance in many areas, and this is one of the means to resolve that. And we're really happy that we've been able to kind of get carve outs and return to not to like we don't have a preferential rate over US production, but we have a now increasingly a rate that allows us to sell competitively to the US products that the US needs.
Well, and as you say, we are strong partners in a lot of areas. I think one of those that is part of this agreement is aerospace. And collaborating on that. So I would imagine, the 232 helps support that. And,
I'm super excited about aerospace. I've spent a lot of time in my career working in and around aerospace. And I used to promote the aerospace investment sector in the UK a number of years ago. And, it's one of the kind of the crown jewels of the British manufacturing economy. Aerospace, after the US, we in France compete to be the biggest kind of aerospace industry. So anything that can enable greater collaboration between UK and US aerospace, because we're highly integrated as well. Many Boeings fly with Rolls-Royce engines, and many Airbus parts produced in the UK use American supply chain product as well. So removing barriers on aerospace is massively important, because we trust each other's skilled labor force to produce the high quality products you need in aerospace in order to keep us all safe when we fly. So this is great for both of our economies that we're able to do that. And our industry is really excited about that, as it is in automotive. Another area where we don't compete in volume with the US. We produce a lot of prestige cars, and then obviously Jaguar and Land Rover produce a lot of kind of really nice vehicles that Americans seem to value. See lots of Range Rovers on the road, and you also see lots of Range Rovers in movies as well, which is wonderful. So being able to remove those barriers. Ford is, I think, the biggest investor in the UK. So we really value US automotive investment in the UK, and when we speak to the big Michigan based companies, the UK is not the threat. The UK is a fair partner. So that's why we're really happy to see aerospace automotive kind of the heart of our manufacturing to be kind of enabled to do better business with the US.
That's terrific. So we touched on some of those markets and agriculture. Any other major market areas that show some opportunity with this trade deal, or that will benefit particularly here in the Midwest that you will?
Personally, what I'd love to see, I'm not part of the negotiations, and I think our negotiators will never thank me for this. But Wisconsin is famous, of course, for cheese, and the UK produces amazing cheeses as well. I would love to see, people in the UK get to enjoy cheese as well as people wearing cheese hats at football. We want to be able to see what that's all about, right? So. And I'd love to see. we do see British cheeses on the shelves here. It's quite expensive, but I'd love to see more of it, because the variety and difference that we produce. So that's a kind of I was in Wisconsin this week, and of course I got to try beer and cheese. The beer you don't export even to other states, which I found quite interesting. But it is a great kind of social product that I'd love to see more, moving in both directions. But as I say, I don't want to get ahead of our negotiators. They will not thank me for that, because cheese is also very often a problematic area.
It's certainly, and certainly an emotional one, without a doubt. As we close, Richard, are there any outreach programs the consulate is doing in regards to, getting the word out, workshops, trade missions, helping shippers, exporters, and importers navigate this?
Yeah, absolutely. There's very important elements of the work that continues. We're trying to have a digital agreement, and what we mean by that is, yes, it's about technologies and being able to better tech together, but it's also really about removing paperwork, bureaucracy,
Sure.
and processes from exports. We want everything to be, our life is lived on apps now. We want to get to the point where our exporters and American exporters can do all that they need to do to move products backwards and forwards quickly, efficiently, with the least amount of paperwork and bureaucracy as possible. So we're really trying to streamline that. So that's a really important next step in the process. But in terms of our outreach, I cover 14 states across the Midwest, so I'm on the road a lot. I was in Wisconsin Sunday and Monday, met some great companies there, the life sciences and in the energy space. We want to. I have no excuse. It's just down the road, but I want to get back as often as I can. I want to engage with organizations that represent different industries. I mentioned kind of farm bureaus of farmers before, manufacturing organizations. I want to talk to kind of, the different economic agencies in and around Wisconsin and other states, just to talk to them about, the UK does great things. How do we help you explain to the UK companies what great things that you've got to offer? Because we are like instinctive free traders. We really passionately believe in free trade. And for me, that means UK companies setting up in the US, as well as US companies setting up in the UK. Most countries promote exports and inward investment. We just promote trade, and we want people to come in. And however you want to do business, we don't care. We're government. We don't tell you how to do business. Our job really is to make it as easy as possible for companies to sell what they have. And we believe if you've got a great product and a good price, your product will sell. And that's what we want to get to.
It's a win-win. It's a win-win for, all parties. Well, next time you're in Wisconsin, please let us know.
Absolutely. We'll come and see you.
Yeah, terrific. Just a thrill to have you today, Richard Hyde, and thank you. It's nice to have some positive news in the world of tariff and trade these days. So definitely refreshing, but truly some great opportunity for our strongest, one of our strongest trade partners. So thank you again for joining us on Talking Trade.
Thank you so much. It's been great to meet you.
You've been listening to Talking Trade with Sandi Siegel and Ken Wasilek. Sponsored by the Wisconsin Center for Manufacturing and Productivity, Michael Best Strategies, and Carroll University.